You wake up one morning, and every major headline says the same thing. Every country in the world is in debt. The United States owes more than $38 trillion. Europe carries trillions in combined obligations. Japan, one of the most advanced economies on Earth, has one of the highest debt ratios in history. Germany is in debt. China is in debt. Even nations built on oil wealth operate with massive liabilities. So the question becomes impossible to ignore. If everyone owes money, who exactly is the lender? Imagine a vast room with a long circular table. Every nation is seated there. In front of each representative lies a document that reads, "I owe you." The numbers are enormous. The promises stretch decades into the future. Yet no one in the room is guarding vaults filled with gold. No one calmly stands and says, "I am the ultimate source of all this money." Because the system doesn't work the way most people assume. To understand it, we need to go back more than 3 centuries. In 1694, England was locked in war. The treasury was empty, and the crown needed resources immediately. Instead of raising taxes overnight, the king turned to wealthy merchants and financiers. His proposal was simple: lend me money now, and I will repay you with interest later. The merchants agreed, not out of charity, but because they received a powerful instrument in return, a written promise backed by the authority of the state. That promise became what we now call a government bond. From that moment forward, something fundamental changed. Governments no longer had to wait until they had money before spending it. They could spend first, borrow second, and refinance obligations as they matured. Debt became a permanent feature rather than a temporary emergency tool. Today, the mechanism operates on a global scale. Governments issue bonds to finance budgets, infrastructure, social programs, and military spending. Banks purchase a portion of those bonds. Pension funds invest heavily in them to secure retirements. Insurance companies hold them for stability. Central banks keep them as reserves. When interest payments comes due, they are funded through tax revenue. Citizens contribute through income taxes, sales taxes, and corporate taxes. That money flows back into financial institutions and investment funds. It circulates through retirement accounts and balance sheets. The system resembles a vast network of pipes. Capital flows continuously, redirected from one corner of the world to another. The United States may owe money to foreign investors, but it also owes the majority of its debt internally to domestic institutions and citizens. Japan lends abroad, yet much of its debt is owned by its own population. Europe finances developing economies, and those economies often reinvest surplus capital into major sovereign bonds. It forms a global cycle, an interconnected financial ecosystem. But beneath the numbers, beneath the contracts and digital ledgers, lies something less tangible. Trust. Trust that governments will honor their commitments. Trust that economies will continue growing. Trust that new buyers will always step forward when old bonds mature. Trust that inflation will remain manageable. Trust that political systems will remain stable enough to sustain repayment. Here is the crucial insight. Most major nations do not aim to eliminate their debt entirely. The objective is sustainability, not eradication. Old debt is replaced with new debt. Bonds mature and are refinanced. Interest is serviced. The structure rolls forward year after year. In many ways, sovereign debt has evolved into a foundational layer of the modern financial system. Government bonds are treated as safe assets. They are used as collateral in banking. They underpin pension systems. They stabilize insurance portfolios. They anchor central bank reserves. If a large nation suddenly erased all of its debt, the shockwaves would move through financial markets. Institutions that rely on those bonds for security and liquidity would need replacements. The system is designed around their existence. And yet, while the structure circulates internally, the benefits are not distributed evenly. Interest payments tend to move upward toward those who hold financial assets. Tax contributions come broadly from the population, but asset ownership is concentrated. So when people say that the world owes money to itself, the statement contains truth, but only partially. Yes, the system is circular. Yes, capital flows in loops, but gains and burdens are not symmetrical, which brings us to the final and most delicate question. What happens if trust weakens? What happens if investors begin to doubt repayment? If inflation accelerates unexpectedly? If political instability disrupts confidence? The entire architecture depends on belief in continuity. The moment trust cracks, debt stops being an abstract figure on a spreadsheet. It becomes a catalyst for crisis. Markets react, yields spike, liquidity tightens, governments face pressure. History has demonstrated this pattern repeatedly, from sovereign defaults to financial crashes. Debt by itself is not inherently destructive. Managed carefully, it fuels growth and enables long-term investment. But unmanaged or mistrusted, it can destabilize entire economies. And through centuries of wars, recessions, booms, and technological revolutions, one pattern remains consistent. Debt rarely disappears. It is restructured, it is refinanced, it is inflated away, it is transferred from one balance sheet to another. But it almost never simply vanishes. It changes hands.